Hi everyone, I'm going to read a book to you. It's called The Secret Rescuers, The Storm Dragon. I'm going to read it with Toothless here. I'm not going to show you the covers of the pictures yet because I want you to think about and see if you can picture the characters. This story is taking place back in the old times with castles and kings and knights and things like that. So I want you to see if you can picture the castle, see if you can picture the characters. So, The Secret Rescuers, The Storm Dragon by Paula Harrison. Chapter 1, The Golden Songbird. Sophie hurried out of the castle door carrying a heavy wooden chair. She stopped at the bottom of the steps to get her breath back. Her arms ached from lifting things all morning. A gentle breeze blew across the castle battlements, ruffling her wavy golden hair. "Hurry up, Sophie! There's no time to dawdle!" Mrs. Ricker marched down the steps, her eyes bulging behind her spectacles. "And tie your hair back at once! I don't want the Queen to see you looking so messy." Mrs. Ricker was the royal housekeeper. She was the kind of person who could spot untidy hair or a dirty apron from miles away. "Yes, Mrs. Richter." Sophie searched her apron pocket for a hair bobble and quickly braided her hair. Her parents had died when she was little, and she worked as a maid at Grey Towers Castle ever since. She was used to the housekeeper's strict ways. Mrs. Richter went back inside. Sophie picked up the chair again and walked across the wooden drawbridge. The castle was circled by a moat filled with water, and the drawbridge was the only way to get across. When she reached the other side, Sophie set down the chair and gazed around. Grey Towers Castle stood on a hill, and the view from the top was amazing. The kingdom of Aramea stretched out in every direction, with its thick forests, bright rivers, and majestic snowy mountains. 2 planets hung together in the sky, a green one and a smaller purple one. Sophie loved the story of how the planets grew by magic in the air. Storytellers visiting the castle would often tell the tale, and she would hide behind the door to listen. Sometimes the storytellers would talk of magical animals such as unicorns, star wolves, cloud bears, and dragons. Then Sophie would promise herself that one day she'd leave the castle to go look for the creatures in those stories. She shaded her eyes to peer into the distance. Beyond the fields was a huge forest that stretched for miles. Away to the west, a silver river wound along the valley. Sophie had heard of many magical animals, but she'd never seen any of them. Could there be a star wolf in that forest? Or a unicorn by that river? She was too far away to see, and it wasn't likely the creatures would ever come closer to the castle. Not everyone was kind to magical animals, but Sophie didn't really know why. The Queen's favorite knight, Sir Fitzroy, had once declared he thought it was wrong for creatures to have magical powers at all. Sighing, Sophie dragged the chair around the corner to the gatehouse. The ground was covered with tables, chairs, wardrobes, and boxes. Queen Viola had decided to get rid of some palace furniture along with the old king's belongings. King Rupert had died the year before. He'd been a great collector, so there were an awful lot of things the Queen wanted to throw away. A boy with a freckled face leaped out from behind a wardrobe. "Hey, Sophie!" "Tom!" Sophie gasped. "Don't make me jump like that." "Sorry." Tom grinned and wiped his hands on his muddy trouser. "Is there much more to fetch?" "No, that's it." "Good. I don't think I'd be able to fit anything else on the cart." Tom went off, whistling. Sophie walked around the mountain of stuff. The old furniture was going to Ingleton, a nearby village, to be sold at the market. Tom, who worked in the gardens, would be taking it there in the cart. Among the worn-out chairs and tables, Sophie could see the old king's belongings. There was a pile of rolled-up maps, a huge telescope, and towers of old books with titles such as Paths Across the Hesky Mountains. It made Sophie feel sad seeing the unwanted books piled up on the ground. Then she noticed something else and gasped. On the grass, under a table, was a small black chest with a silver lock. Sophie recognized it straight away. The king had collected crystals and kept them in that chest. She'd only seen them once, when the king had opened the box as she was passing by. She'd never forgotten the dazzling beauty of the stones inside. Surely the queen hadn't thrown them away. Her heart thumping, she climbed over 2 chairs and scrambled under the table to get to the chest. Her apron was really grubby now, but she didn't care. Her fingers struggling with the silver catch, but eventually she opened it and pulled up the lid. Crystals of every color, from ruby red to emerald green and sapphire blue, gleamed inside the box. Sophie took out a deep blue one and held it in the palm of her hand. This was the color she'd always imagined the sea might be. A fluttering noise made her look up. A golden songbird flew down and perched on the back of a chair, watching her with beady black eyes. Sophie put the blue crystal back, suddenly feeling as if she was doing something wrong. The bird fluffed up its golden feathers and let out a trill of beautiful music. Sophie had never heard anything so lovely. She hoped the bird might sing again, but instead it fluttered down beside her. Then it hopped onto the edge of the chest and tilted its heavy head, eyeing first Sophie and then the crystals. "They're beautiful, aren't they?" said Sophie. The songbird hopped right into the middle of the crystals and flapped its wings, scattering stones out of the chest and onto the ground. "Stop!" cried Sophie, trying to catch the spilling crystals. "We'll lose them if you do that." But the songbird went on beating its wings, sending more stones flying. At last it stopped and pecked at the remaining crystals. Sophie leaned closer. It was trying to get at something beneath the stones. The bird had a piece of purple material in its beak, and it pulled and pulled. Finally, the bird let go of the cloth and gave an impatient shrill. It was almost as though it was asking her to help. "What have you found?" Sophie took hold of the purple material and pulled it free of the crystals. She found herself holding a small cloth bag that had something heavy inside. The songbird fluffed its feathers again and watched expectantly. Sophie's fingers tingled as she undid the drawstring bag and reached in. Her hand brushed against rough stone. The purse was full of small pieces of rock. She took one out and studied its lumpy gray surface. The bird gave a final burst of song. Then, without another look at the bag or at Sophie, it flew off. Sophie frowned at the rough stone. All that fuss about bumpy pieces of rock? She thought the songbird was trying to show her something. But why this? A swirl of wind lifted her hair, and a shaft of light beamed down on the stone's rough edges. Sophie felt a strange tumbling in her stomach, as if something was about to happen. "Sophie!" Mrs. Ricker's footsteps pounded on the drawbridge. Sophie quickly crawled out from under the table. She'd lost track of time. She dropped the little stone into the bag and put the bag in her apron pocket. Then she scooped the crystals back into the chest and climbed over the furniture. "Coming, Mrs. Ricker," she called, rushing off toward the castle. All right, can you picture the castle and the drawbridge. Can you picture what Sophie looks like? Here's what the author illustrated by Sophie Williams. Here's what she said she looks like. And there's her getting into that. Were you close? Songbird. All right. That's chapter 1. I will read chapter 2 in another episode.